introducing Cain and his lineage, and then chapter 5 where it's introducing Seth and his lineage. And again, just to reiterate, it's bringing to light the theme of the tale of the two seeds. Okay. Last week we talked about Enoch, and anybody remember why Enoch was so special?
He didn't die, God took him.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like it happened to Elijah in the future.
Right. And anybody also want to share what they learned in regards to the parallel of the all the generations in Genesis 5 versus serving as an apologetic up and against counter narratives pre-flood leading up to the flood?
Cain was supposed to be a wanderer. Cain built the city of Nod,
right,
which is basically kind of a fake garden.
Right.
And that's where the seed of Cain kind of took off from there.
Yeah, but specifically, again, is it working? Sound working? Keep monitoring it, please.
Cain's seed were no longer worship God. So they focused in on themselves.
Right.
Whereas the line of Seth, it said that people began to call upon the name of the Lord.
Right.
And the thing was Cain, the first child of Eve, and Eve said, I made a man, look what I have done.
Right.
And whereas with Seth, Eve gave the glory this time to God.
Right.
So they have the two groups all split.
Right, yeah, that's the foundational kind of paradigm of launching into these two lineages. But specifically, the Seth line, Genesis 5, we have the 10 patriarchs. Do you remember this from last week? The 10 patriarchs? And that's comparable to the 10 Sumerian kings. This is on page 53 of your handouts, right?
Yeah.
And then the parallel is the 7th, Enoch, and then the Enuma Deranki. And so, okay. So now, after this whole narrative of the generations of Seth, from Seth, okay, Enoch being nestled as the 7th generation, okay, now and at the end we kind of get into the introduction to Noah. And we talked about now Noah's name is a play on words, so word play, which is significant, especially in Genesis. All the names essentially are not, more like, it's something you always want to look into. Doesn't mean it always is. But Noah is a word play where his name is identical to the Hebrew word for rest, and it also rhymes with the Hebrew word for comfort and so on. So now we're entering into Genesis chapter 6, and I mentioned how it's weird. We've read it before. We've heard some of these names before, so let's dig in. Paul, can you read verses 1 through 2 on 57? Cheryl, 3 through 4. Eric, why don't you do 5 through 6? And then Max, do verse 7 in that chunk. And then Connie, can you bring us home 8 through 10?
When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose.
Then the Lord said, my spirit will not continue with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown.
The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled.
So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created. And with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground. For I regret that I
eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
So we're only focusing on just now this precursor launching into the flood narrative, because there's a lot here. So the first is this: when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose. Who are the sons of God, and who are the sons of the daughters of humans, and what's going on here? It's kind of weird, because then we haven't gotten to it yet, but really what happens is, we'll get into that. I don't want to give myself away here and give it away. All right, so there's actually 3 views, kind of traditional views of who the sons of Elohim are, sons of God are. Okay, there's the Sethite view. Okay, now if you remember, Cain and his descendants are in a double curse, a double exile. Right? Seth and his descendants are under the single curse or consequences and a single exile from the Garden of Eden. So it has always been understood that there's the Eden, right? And then in the center is the Garden of Eden. That the Seth and his descendants were in Eden, but not the Garden of Eden. Okay, right? It was the garden that was closed off. Okay. That's also where Cain was originally, and then Cain received the double consequence, double exile, wandering beyond Eden itself. Does that make sense? So we have Seth and his descendants in Eden, and then you have Cain and his descendants outside of Eden. Okay. The Sethite view is, even though we just kind of walk through Genesis 5, it's been made clear, like I said, that it's there, but it doesn't quite reach the level of Garden of Eden humanity, right? There's hope, though, because there comes Noah. But the Sethite view, hey James, how you doing? The Sethite view holds that somewhere along the line, some descendants of Seth, not mentioned in the patriarchs here, started to intermarry and have children with the sons, essentially the sons of Cain. All right, or the daughters of humanity is another way of communicating. Okay, so not everybody in the Seth line was so righteous, and therefore went and did their own thing and so on. All the views that I'm going to share with you all have merit, all have concern, if you want to put it that way. They all have their reason as to why they exist. The other reason why the sons of God, kind of relating to the next one that I'll share, is Scripture uses the phrase sons of God in a couple ways. One refers to godly humans. It's moving forward throughout Scripture. The other time, major way, the sons of Elohim, that phrase, that title is used, is referring to essentially angels. Okay? So the other view of who these sons of God are is that they're spiritual beings. Okay? They're part of the divine council likened to Satan. So they were eating creatures. Okay? That left where they resided and went to humanity, and they did their thing. All right? So that is another view that is kind of an historic view of that phrase, that, okay, there's the Sethite view, and then there's this angelic spiritual beings that leave their rightful place of residence, and they are the ones that take matters into their own hands. and claim, and then end up having children. There's some evidence for that. So Jude 1:6, I'll read it. This is Jude 1:6, referring to fallen angels, and I'll get to this in a second. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. So it's not specifically referring to anything that the angels did, okay, or these spiritual beings, other than they, yeah, exactly, and did something rebellious. Okay. However, in context, this is where it's crazy. Is how many of you have heard of the Book of Enoch?
Yeah, I've heard some crazy.
The Book of Enoch is not canon. It's canon in some Christian churches, like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of them. The Book of Enoch explicitly attributes Genesis 6 to being fallen angels. Okay, so it kind of comes down to the validity or the lack of validity of that book and how it's viewed. But it is explicit in Enoch talking about angels marrying human women and having children. Okay.
They were part angel, part human?
Well, not us. No, not us. And then it is believed that Jude, that we read, which is canon, is referring to Enoch. Okay. Like I said, I'm just sharing with you the views. I think both, well, the third view, let me get into that. The third view is to try to reconcile this and not be so specific, is fallen humanity marrying daughters of other humans. Not that one. It's a setup for you. Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth. You have one at a spot. Sorry.
Fallen humans.
Yeah. So it's an attempt to kind of like not be so specific, and it's just this idea. Okay, fallen humans marrying daughters of humans. So sons of God who were once righteous are no longer righteous. They're fallen. They're now in rebellion, and then now they're marrying any women they choose. Okay? That's just kind of like this loose, general way of trying to approach it. Okay, so there's the Sethite view, the angel view, and then there's the broad view. Here's the thing. I think it's interesting. I think it's really worth exploring. But no matter what, it has everything to do with now God's creation, whether angel or whether humans, are doing something on their own accord apart from God's commands. Okay, they're in rebellion. Okay, and that rebellion is growing exponentially, leading to greater consequences, greater effects for it, for the world. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily eradicate the main thrust of what's taking place, but
Well, if you read Jude 7, just in 7 to 6, kind of infers that
sexual immorality, yeah. When it then brings up Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Yeah. So that's why like it's not so explicit, but it's subtle, and it kind of seems like it's insinuating angels that were sexually immoral. So whether it's Sethite descendants taking matters in their own hands, right? Rebelling against God, no longer living righteously, no longer walking with God, as Enoch did, and then also Noah, okay? Or it's these Eden creatures, as we've discussed what Satan was, these Eden creatures essentially kind of doing what Satan did, and taking matters into their own hands, right? Maybe their own attempt to kind of restore the Garden of Eden, what it was supposed to be, by going out on their own accord and trying to make something happen. Or it was, again, where it's just this broad, fallen sons of God, fallen righteous people, now unrighteous, choosing whoever they wish to marry. No matter what, it's rebellion against God and what he intended for his creation, his creatures, and so on. I think there's a lot of, there is the often the quote against the angel view is where Jesus says in Matthew that angels don't marry. Okay, so he's referring to humanity where you're going to be like the angels, or there's no need for marriage. So that's often used to kind of insinuate, why would there be marriage for angels if they're not going to be procreating, right? And angels are immortal, so what is their need to even procreate, so to speak? But again, that's all going beyond the text. There's nothing explicit in Jesus' words that say anything about their ability to procreate or not, right? So these are the three main views, and like I said, all merit kind of looking at them, but all at the foundation. The main point being made is this kind of growing exponential rebellion that's kind of permeating through genealogies, the increasing of humanity, which was always meant to be good because that was the original command, right? Increase in number. But what comes with the increasing of number now is the increasing of evil and rebellion and doing what's, eventually in Judges, what's right in everyone's own eyes, right? All right, so then with that, anybody have questions with that, though, or thoughts?
Yeah, I want to. I've read a lot of these mythologies from Greek, Roman, Scandinavian mythology about their pagan gods who come down and intermarry with the human women.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, what's happened here, is somehow came down to the sons of Noah, the ark. But when the people populated after the flood, they went back to their, heathen behavior.
Right. Yep. It's crazy. And also, go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of people that,
Right. Yeah, there's, and I think that's being popularized a lot right now. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we'll get to that in verses 3 through 4 here. Yeah. Just really weird stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. Like I said, it is fascinating, it is interesting, and it merits kind of considering. But it's important for it to not distract to the main kind of like what's being said, regardless of who the culprits are, right? Because it very much could be these fallen eating creatures. We know it can happen because that's what happened to the serpent, the snake, the cherub, right? Here we go. All right, verse 2. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were good, beautiful or good, and they married, and any of them they chose. This verse directly parallels a significant verse in chapter 3. Anybody want to guess which verse it is? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now we have this direct literary parallel. Okay, again, explaining how this root issue that took place in Genesis 3 is compounding. When Eve saw that the fruit was good, right? Yeah. And I just kind of gave it away. Does anybody want to speak more into why it's so why that's significant? Why would that be included in this?
Well, because of Eve's sense of self-gratification. What you saw was good, and possibly good to eat, just serving the self-gratification, I think You know, I thought about it over years before, and I thought that Satan had used food as bait, knowing that God gave man food from the fruit. And so Satan decided to use it, you know, like.
So why is it significant though, Max, that that it's being used here?
Oh.
That kind of a parallel way of talking of what happened with Eve. True. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? Well, we already said what it's trying to say is what's happening. What you're going to see happening in every generation is literally just an echo of Genesis 3. And it's just a worsening of the Genesis 3. There was just a simple couple humans and Eve and a tree, right? Now it's many humans, or many angels, whichever, eating creatures like Satan. Now it's many of them doing that, having that same kind of bent in their viewpoint. Okay, so remember, it's like there's also this theme of the inversion of worlds. Things are being turned upside down, right? What was once not good is now seen as good, and what was good is now seen as not good, right? Because of what the fall has done, the great human fail. Okay, so here it's the same thing.
What drove Eve to do that? What drove Eve to go ahead and pick that fruit?
We'll just, anybody remember what page we discussed that? I don't want to get too down into that. It would be pages 34 through 39. Well, really, 39 of your handouts if you want to go review that. Yeah. But anyway, what you're kind of getting at is just like, okay, so then this twist that took place in Eve and Adam and Genesis 3 is now happening again, right? It's happening in a compounding exponential way. All right, verses 3 through 4. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children with them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Okay, so some more weirdness. All right, so why does God limit humanity's age?
Well, good, considering that after Adam, people were able to live almost a millennium, but also because man was spiritually dead at that time due to sin, God did not want that continuation of the spiritual deadness to move on.
Yeah, so
it's stop that.
Yeah, putting kind of a limit to. It's not so much about limiting humanity's age in as much as it's trying to limit the effects of evil or rebellion that's taking place. Okay. Just keep it simple there. All right. So it's not just this arbitrary limit humanity's age. What you said is spot on, right? We'll get to that in a little bit too in the next verses. But it's more about limiting humanity's rebellion. And kind of trying to manage the increasing of humanity, which was meant to be good, limiting it from being weaponized.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it's kind of like God curbing evil here as much as possible.
Whole creation, you don't have to belong to judge one another, to judge yourself.
Yeah, so you
I'm
could.
sure God is limiting.
Yeah.
He was never. He was never limited wherever he was.
Yeah, so you could contend that this is introducing a lot of the theme of the Old Testament, where so much of the Old Testament is God kind of managing the evil. right? Curbing evil, making sure it doesn't get too out of control, right? Ultimately with the purpose of interweaving the narrative of restoration, right? Leading to Jesus and onward. So, all right, the Nephilim, who are they? Well, I mean, we kind of already answered it for previous verses, and also kind of it one of the verse 4 points it back to the verses we had already heard. Okay, so the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. So it's re-echoing these verse 2. Okay. And they were what? What characteristics are they? Yeah, they're heroes of old, men of renown, and the name itself is kind of like giant, huge, big, great. Okay, so these are like, this is also a reason why, one reason why it's argued that it's the angelic view of Genesis verses 1 through 2, that the sons of God are angels, because these Nephilim were so abnormally physically capable than other humans.
They're physically capable of some human things. Like, for example, some angels ate.
Well, right. So that's why throughout Scripture, angels can take the form of human.
And they're able to eat.
Right. I don't know about them in naked form, but I just mean they can, in passing, they can take the form and exist. That's why even in Hebrews, it's not just an accident where it says, welcome the stranger, because you might be encountering an angel unknown. Like, that's a weird phrase, right?
Entertaining angel.
Yeah, entertaining angels. Like, what's being said there? Well, obviously, there's this kind of ancient biblical concept that angels could be walking amongst us, and we wouldn't know.
And look like humans.
Right? But either way, there's just this, that's one of the ideas here, is that if the Nephilim are so physically superior, right? They're huge, they're giant, that they're this kind of like, where were they given that kind of posture, that physique? And that's why it's said, it's like, well, they're the hybrid breed between the Edenic creatures and humanity. Regardless, again, I'm just sharing. Either way, the Nephilim are the product of the Genesis, or the verse 2 rebellion. Okay, they are the children of the sons of God and the daughters of humans. Okay, and they were great, they were big, they were huge, and they were heroes of old. Right, they were the world's heroes. Right, and they were men of renown, so they were popular. This is huge. As we continue on, they were what the world, humanity, in this kind of chaotic expansion of evil, saw as good. Okay? But were they really good? Again, remember the flip-flop triangle. Okay? Evil, and this kind of compounding evil, increasing number of humanity, they were the popular ones within that. They were heroes of old, men of renown. But were they really good according to God's design? Right? Did they aid in the flourishing of the Garden of Eden, of life, as what good is defined as in Genesis 1 and 2? Well, the insinuation is no. No. The idea too is, it's kind of insinuated that they were actually the opposite of flourishing life. They were taking life. But beyond that, they were great warriors, right? They were going and hurting, killing, right? And then it gets right into verse 5 through 7. But here we go. The final question I ask: why do you think their size and their worldly perception matters, and how are these connected to some theological themes already on display? Once again, I accidentally answered it, but maybe you didn't hear me.
Instant.
What about the Philistines? Are they descendants of those people, or are they somehow, mingled in?
Goliath, I was wondering.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know.
And the Amalek, how do you say it in English?
Yeah. Okay, so what did I share just a couple minutes ago? Why do you think their size and mainly their worldly perception matters? Their size.
What was considered bad is not
Right. Yeah. So we can't trust worldly perception, right? Because clearly, when Eve saw that it was good for eating, that it was off, right? And then when the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were good for marrying, something was off. Okay? So here we have the perception of the Nephilim being these heroes of old. They were renowned. Something's off. Okay? But we'll try to get into the size kind of imagery here in a second. Okay, verses 5 through 7. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become. All right, so this is where it's like, okay, things are off. How the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. So, kind of already got into this, but remember, what is worse, spiritual death or physical death? So both are not what was intended, as we already discussed. But what's worse is spiritual death, because where does physical death come from? The preceding spiritual death. Okay? So sometimes when we read the Old Testament, it sounds horrible. God is just this callous, mean, right? And you really think about it, Genesis 6, the flood is divine kind of genocide, right? That's the kind of the argument that's made. Okay, and it's important though when we look at stories like the flood and what's taking place. Is we kind of, it's easy to forget about the interplay between spiritual death and physical death. Okay. What state is humanity already in? Spiritual death or physical death?
Physical death. They chose it when Adam and Eve said, okay,
Well, no. So they're all what verses 5 through 7 are communicating is humanity is spiritually dead. Right? Humanity is spiritually dead. Okay. Kind of backing up to, then Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever too, right? But this physical death then is a follow-up. It's going to be taking place. A follow-up to what's already true. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. It's already true. There's some discussion and theological discussion over centuries of what happened with the humanity that died in the flood, where they just kind of wrapped up waiting the Messiah. Like what state were they in? Were they like eradicated completely spiritually and physically, or were their souls resting, waiting for the Messiah? There's a lot of verses that kind of insinuate one way. Don't want to get too much into that because we could be here for a long time. But either way, humanity is already in a state of spiritual death. And any action that God's making is essentially matching what's already true. And as you remember in the narrative, physical death is what in light of spiritual death? Remember the M word that we discussed? You want to go back to it if you have it. It's page 46. If you don't have it, I'm sorry, but it's, you want to look at somebody's,
Third bubble down?
or the second one. Physical, yeah, just go to the second one. AKA, Adam and Eve spiritually die on their own accord and thus consequently physically die, dust to dust, AKA, Adam and Eve return to death. And then the next phrase. Anybody?
Physical death is mercy. Save Adam and Eve from living forever in the state of spiritual death.
Okay. So one could argue that, kind of similar to God limiting the age of humanity, this was ultimately mercy because it was leading to, again, this exponential spiritual death that had ramifications beyond humanity. It had ramifications for the earth. It had ramifications for the animals that humans were tasked to serve and care for. Right? Anything humans touched was corrupted by this rebellion and so on. Okay. You have to hear that in context because, it's not saying that physical death was ever intended to be good. Right? It was never, the holistic picture was it was always meant to be spiritual life leading to a holistic viewpoint of humanity, physical and spiritual life forever. But once the spirit dies, the body dies, okay, and so on. Any thoughts so far? The other thing I wanted to share was, when you hear the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth and his heart was deeply troubled, do you hear that as solely God was angry? I like this. I regret it. How do you hear that phrase? Because it's really important.
Sad.
He was sad. That's what I think.
Sad.
Okay.
That his best creation has gone downhill.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So the word really in the phrase is communicating more of that like sorriness. Well, what's funny, it's not funny, but what's interesting is we've already been introduced to Noah and his name and what it kind of word plays with, rest and comfort. This is the same word. Same word in Hebrew for being sorry, regretting, sorry, is comfort.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird.
They're not the same at all.
Well, the argument is the reason why is the interplay between, if you feel sorry for something, right? What is the inevitable action that takes place after that initial sorry? Well, comfort, right? A bringing of comfort, a bringing of restoration to the situation. Okay, so
If you don't get stuck in being sorry and never move on.
right, so that's kind of the idea is, well, what's taking place in Genesis here, all right? It's this being led to where God's taking this action, but he's sorry, he's regretting what he's done, but that word also itself projects a hope. Okay. A restorative action to come. Well, what happens immediately, verses 8 through 10 and then onward?
Noah found favor.
God finds someone to bring comfort and hope and rest to humanity, which we already were introduced to Noah in a minute, before.
My impression I heard regret, I think of a child that lost his or her toy, or his or her toy got broken, and he was just crying his or her eyes off. Mommy, my toy horse broke, and the girl said, I lost my dolly.
Yeah.
I thought it was something like that on that level, but
I can see how you could go with that. Yeah.
change the picture.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think God's regret is more than just, well, I wish I hadn't done that. His regret was that he wanted to destroy humanity. So that was pretty powerful.
He wanted a do-over.
Yeah, maybe.
But he said that
to
it came to that point that he needed to do what he was about to do. But it also kind of, again, it wasn't like this, it insinuates that there's an action here that's intertwined with hope, right? He finds Noah, right, who becomes that, again, playing on that word, the comfort and the rest for humanity, in the general sense. Yeah. All interesting. All right, so, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Okay, kind of jumping ahead, it kind of answers it for you, but why? Well, one is, it's in God's heart. Okay, I'll answer that part of it. It's in God's heart. It's already insinuated that God's looking for the restoration, right? He's looking for the hope, the comfort to come. But why? What is also said? Okay, I mean, sure. But why did Noah?
Oh, sorry, I'm wrong.
Just go down another verse. Noah was blameless among the people of his time. Yeah, so he's part of Seth's line, and he walked the famous phrase here.
Well, like Enoch.
Yeah. He walked faithfully with God. Okay? So, I put this here. I don't know if you remember the Ruth study, but it's right there. But if you want to cheat and read it, or just try to answer it, what is the core meaning of righteous?
Be humble.
Okay, yeah. Okay, relate to that to the concept of size.
Small.
Yeah, make oneself small, to become small, right? Since Genesis 3 onward, the temptation is to enlarge oneself, right? Build a city, quite literally, enlarge oneself, great city. So righteous at its core means that to become small, to be made small, to make oneself small. So here's Noah, in view of God, and in view of other people, he has made himself small. Like he has not. And why is that? How does that connect with verse 4? And this view within.
Oh, it contrasts to the Nephilim, who are viewed as hot shots. And Noah saw himself as a humble person.
Yeah, so it starts with this introduction of the Nephilim, who were great. They were big. Okay? And the worldly perception is they were of renown. And Noah, it ends kind of, well, it doesn't end because we're going to the flood narrative, but this kind of section wraps up with and reintroducing Noah, who was the opposite of the Nephilim. Okay? He was one that was small, in a good way, right? In a Genesis 1 and 2 way. He was small, he was not enlarged before God and others. Yeah.
Yeah, but look who's large now. Noah stuck around. Nephilim disappeared.
Couldn't be that small, he made a big hole.
Yeah.
God,
Well, again, it's more about using the imagery of size to communicate a spiritual truth or reality. It doesn't mean like he was 5'2" per se, but in terms of his posture, his demeanor, his faith, right? His faith, walking with God, his holiness, he had made himself small.
So sorry, the word
Right.
righteous means small? In what language?
It's a figure of speech.
In Hebrew.
Hebrew. It means the word will be translated righteous, but etymologically, what's being communicated is this idea of to be made small. Right?
God-fearing.
God-fearing.
Humble.
Yeah.
Smaller.
Yeah.
Right. So the root of being in the state of right. Okay. To be righteous, to be in the state of right, is to be made small before God. Okay.
Yeah, he's not
As opposed to what's going on is humanity is the opposite of that. Right? That's the effects of the fall. Right? It's trying to be God. Right? It's trying to enlarge oneself.
Like Jesus said, that he who exalts himself shall be humbled, and he who humbles himself shall be exalted.
Exactly. Okay. So then now we'll get into the whole flood boat building and everything in the future weeks. Or anybody have any wrap up questions?
Question again. Okay, so you talked about, we are referring to the Nephilim as giants, but because of their hero state or their men of renown, they were elevated to that particular thing. But the verse doesn't necessarily say they were giants in physical form.
That
Which is,
means giant.
it does mean giant?
Yeah, large, great, big.
And there's a direct connection to angels.
So what I was saying is verses 1 through 2 and then 3 through 4, there is the viewpoint that the sons of Elohim were angels, fallen angels.
Their connection.
They were, specifically, they were part of the divine council, who were likened to the serpent, who were Eden creatures that existed within the Garden of Eden, where heaven and earth met. Okay.
They were rebellion.
Demoted angels.
Yeah, they were rebellion.
Well, they demoted themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't demoted. God didn't demote them. He demoted Satan after he demoted himself, right? The serpent. The view is these angels followed suit to the original serpent, the original angel, fallen angel. Yeah. Well, right. We don't know the state, like where they're fallen in the sense that here, if it is them, they're fallen in the sense that this is their rebellious act, right? They are in process of falling here. And it doesn't mean like they fell from the sky.
Oh, no.
But they weren't like fallen stars. Fallen means the state of rebellion, right?
They couldn't use their powers
Right.
and magic and everything connects to
Right. Like I said, there's
angels, right?
Jude and this extra canonical book of Enoch, communicated such that these were, right? But there's also the view that they are descendants of Seth, the righteous line, that then got corrupted, that left, married, had kids and stuff. Yeah, so either way, like I said, it's now this exponential rebellion that's taking place across God's creation. Again, seeing Genesis 6 and a lot of things that in parallel with the first 3 chapters of Genesis, it can make a lot of sense that it's angels, because who rebelled first in Genesis 3? Angels, right? It was the angel.
Yeah.
So it makes sense if it's trying to now echo what came before, hey Justin, then it would be, it makes sense that it's introducing now not just one fallen angel, but now it's multiple, and not just 2 humans, but multiple. Right? It's, again, this exponential growth of evil.
Or we're supposed to believe that Noah is a descendant of Seth, not be a part of fallen angels.
Of who is, sorry?
Whether Noah is descended from Seth.
Yeah, because what it's doing is it's still introducing this righteous line versus unrighteous line, and again, it's not to communicate a fixed line of teams that it can, teams can change. However, it matters literally in the sense of it ultimately leading to who.
Jesus.
Okay. All right, let's end in prayer. Lord Jesus, we give you thanks for this time together. Continue to bless us by your Spirit and your word. And as prayed earlier, continue to walk with us, live within us, leading us to life everlasting by your work in us and through us. Amen. All right, thanks everybody. Who wants to build a boat?
He